any insights you had on convincing your parents after 3 years of piano lessons and 3 years of violin lessons that you didn't have a passion for that?
Can you share with us any insights on how you convinced your parents after 3 years of piano lessons and violin lessons that you didn't have a passion for that? That's actually hilariously apt. So I started piano and violin when I was 3. It was not the best decision. My sister, on the other hand, she's over there. You can stand up if you want.
Stand up, stand up.
Yeah, be loud, be proud. So
Come on.
she actually continued with piano and violin, and by the time that I was 4 or 5, it was obvious that I was being left in the dust. Part of that was because she was older, but I think a significantly larger part was that she actually had passion for it. And I would be playing and I'd fall asleep on the piano keys, so not a very good sign. I finally, when I was around 7, I wrote this horrific poem that doesn't need repeating, but it basically said, I'm terrible at piano, I'm terrible at violin, I'm never going to make anything of it, let me write instead. And miraculously my mom looked at this terrible poem, and instead of seeing it for what it was, which was just a very crude expression of 7-year-old pathos, she decided to listen to me, and I really admire her for doing that.
Well, I can add, she basically came to me to plead. She said, music does not speak to me. Let me write. And I really took her words seriously, and I have seen a sign of sleeping on the piano.
I mean, it helped that I made it clear to her that the economic investment wasn't getting any payouts.
Exactly. Thank you.
Any other questions? Don't be shy.
So did you go through the regular school system or your home school?
Did I go through the regular school system or was I homeschooled? That's a great question. So actually from when I was, I started reading when I was 3 years old, so as a result it would have been a little bit redundant for me to go to preschool or kindergarten, so I was homeschooled up until around 8th grade. I began doing like online classes, and then I went to more classes at regular school, like starting 9th grade and then full-time in 11th and 12th grade.
So you talked about redefining merit, and I'm going to talk about this in terms of college admissions and, say, job applications. How would you redo that system if you could start from scratch?
That's a tricky question. So how would I redo the whole college admissions, that system, as far as how it determines merit, if I could redo it from scratch? So I definitely thought a lot about that, as since last year I was obviously filling out my college apps, and I was extraordinarily stressed out because I did not have grades that were, I mean, I didn't have a 4.0, which a lot of my friends did, and because of all my traveling for speeches and stuff, I hadn't taken like 6 APs every year. I think that a huge problem with the way that we look at merit right now is that it's extremely focused on, well, basically numbers. And there's so many different ways that people should be able to show their merit, whether it's with, I know, you could submit like a portfolio for art, you could maybe submit a research paper for science, but most of the time, those are not made clearly apparent. The average kid who doesn't have a college counselor or who doesn't have a, who isn't reading through a giant book on college apps, doesn't know that you can submit supplements, doesn't know that there are all these different other ways to kind of show your skills. So I would highlight that much more, and I would definitely lessen the role of GPA and SAT scores in the decision process. Not because I don't think that a basic knowledge base is necessary, but because I think that there are so many other kinds of merit that really need to be considered in order to create a diverse pool of students. I obviously don't have all the answers, and I really want to talk to more college admissions officers because I know that it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. But I know that I got into UC Berkeley, but one of my best friends who wore his Cal sweatshirt every day practically for 4 years didn't. And when I look at something like that and I realize that he had so much talent and skill, et cetera, then of course I kind of question, like, how are those decisions made and how can we all make them better?
Any other questions? Okay, one last question. Go ahead.
So you mentioned misrepresentation. What was your biggest takeaway from watching that documentary?
What was my biggest takeaway from watching the documentary Misrepresentation? I'm glad that there's another person in the audience here who knows what I'm talking about. I love that film. I think one of my biggest takeaways from Misrepresentation was that we can be the solutions, and that women can create a lot more positive. So actually, sorry, to back up a little bit, Misrepresentation is a film that discusses the images of women in the media, particularly how those images are hypersexualized and portray women in objectifying roles. And it goes on to give a lot of examples of how this is harmful, particularly for women in politics, women who are trying to enter science and other fields. So I would say that I realized what the role of women is in creating more positive media images. If we look at someone like Sheryl Sandberg, who created the Lean In photo series on Getty Images, she basically said, you know, there's a problem with the fact that all the images of women on stock photo sites are like women laughing alone eating salad, or you know, someone washing dishes. We need images of women that show them skateboarding, that show them speaking, that show them in a boardroom, that show them with test tubes. And so she basically said, we're going to create this series. Looking at misrepresentation motivated me personally to think about how I could contribute with something like that, and it made me think about how image really is very important with everything.
Okay, with that, we'll end it with the audience, letting her hear it roar. All right, Katy Perry. All right, thank you again. Very